I wanted to take a few moments just to talk through how at DPR we're squeezing more value out of coordination by leveraging artificial intelligence. I know the title's a little on the wordy side, so I wanted to just go through and kind of break it down into pieces. So starting out with how we do things today, the goal is to do more with less. How do we increase the amount of data we're capturing while not overwhelming the user or the audience with this tidal wave of ones and zeros? So to take a look through what I would just say, at a pretty high level, what is standard today is we get issued a set of construction documents. We'll go through, develop our model. We'll do some 3D coordination, some spatial coordination. We sign off, and then we install and turn over. There's a little bit of a gap between the sign off and installation and turnover. So my question to just ponder as I go through this is, are we leaving any value on the table by not leveraging the model in the field as much as maybe we could? So to get into that, my question, again, rhetorical, just have you ever been asked by a client, how do you know you're building per the model? And also, how do you guarantee that your as-built that you're turning over at the end of the job is accurate? Hopefully at the end of this conversation, you'll have a little better sense of how to answer those questions. If it's nothing new, then I apologize now. Hopefully there is at least a nugget for everybody in this next few minutes of conversation. So how do we connect the dots? So you notice there's a couple dots in there that don't have any descriptions on them. And so let's kind of go through those. So between the sign-off and installation, we started fairly recently doing, layout drawings, prefab, spool sheets, trying to leverage that model a little past sign-off. Next, we had model-based layout. So now how do we take the model elements that we spend so much time and money coordinating out into the field with us and install it per the model? So that gets us to installation, but it doesn't guarantee our as-built accuracy. And that's where reality capture starts to come in. So we started adding reality capture with laser scanning, photogrammetry, progress photos, etc. We also then started to look at, well, how do we leverage these point clouds, this data set, to validate the installation, and then ultimately to update our as-built models, to then give a better product at turnover, not just a red line set where someone at the end of the job sits down with their favorite red color pencil or marker, and they just start doodling on what they think happened in the field. Even if it's happening real time, it's still your best guess at what you feel is being installed, not necessarily exactly what is. So far, probably nothing groundbreaking, maybe not quite mainstream yet, but there's probably no one on the call that hasn't heard these things. So what if I said there was more? So going past turnover, if we have a really good as-built model, our design teams, our owners, can start leveraging that information to make better design improvements, to document lessons learned, and ultimately to allow us construction guys to influence design. So at this point, you may be asking, how do we align the virtual world with the real world? A lot of people will say it's through best fit. You take the modeled elements and you align it to something that's out in the field, maybe walls or steel. But the question that comes from that is, what about construction tolerances? Everything in construction has a tolerance. Nothing is installed perfectly to what it was meant to be. So how do we deal with construction tolerances? The answer, if you ask me, is control. The hierarchy of control, going from primary through secondary to tertiary, also known as building control, that allows us to make sure that we're building off of one network or a system of interconnected networks to then everything gets verified. So we build to one network and we verify to that same network. Without that single network, how can we say one contractor is wrong or another one is right? Could they both potentially be right or potentially both be wrong? So let's talk about how DPR does this. More specifically, how we leverage laser scanning with AI to get better and deeper insights into what we're actually building, not just what we think we're building. So this gets into the meat of the presentation of capture and validation. To me, it's more than just a hollow commitment to say that, yeah, we are building what we intended on building, early in my career, I had a client come up to me and ask, we're walking in the field and he asked, well, how do you know that what you coordinated is being installed? And unfortunately, the best answer I could come up with, fresh out of college is, I spent enough time in the model. I start to recognize things when they're off in the field. And if we can get enough eyes on the model, then we have more people, more chances of picking up on things if they get installed incorrectly. The hard part is, as soon as one system gets installed incorrectly or in the wrong spot, it very quickly can become this rapid who can get there first. And it's back to the old ways of doing construction, is the first one in wins. That person gets all the space. So we got to really be careful of how we answer that question to not fall into those same pitfalls as we have in the past. So defining the scope, like I said, we spend an exorbitant amount of time and money designing these buildings, creating models, coordinating to make sure everything fits, trying to keep sequence in mind, constructability in mind. But then we almost lose the model after we sign off. We create spool drawings, we create layout drawings, but we don't really take the model with us. So why don't we put it to work more, and how do we get there? So the easiest way to get to where you're going is to have a roadmap. So the goal is to just define, what these assets are, where they are, and communicate them visually. By defining assets by system, and most importantly, we're aligning expectations. The first iteration, so if you see it says version 2, the first iteration was just, we said to the trades, our trade partners, that we're scanning, stub ups, manholes, vaults, vertical bends, and we just described what we're scanning. Whereas on version 2, because of all the confusion as well, is this an asset or is this not, we decided to go through and spend a little more time and define it. Come up with a list, highlight them all. We put them into a system where, there was a lot less questioning of, is this an asset or is it not? The hard part is taking CAD out into the field can also be a challenge, because you're not connecting the virtual environment to the existing conditions. So to do that, to increase the communication, we used SkyCatch, Drone Deploy. There are many out there. We happen to use SkyCatch on this one, but we took that crossings map, that asset map, and we overlaid it on the ground truth. This made it contextual. This made it easy to understand. The trades could go in, they could turn off all the layers except for theirs, and they could still see what we intended on scanning. And they can also see, well, based on yesterday's flight, I'm getting pretty close. And so they can start being aware of what's coming and start requesting scans, so that we're not trying to jump through hoops, fight fires all day. I hate to say it, but I'm not a firefighter. I don't think I would go into a burning building if it were, in front of me. But in this case, in construction, many times we are very reactionary. And so if we can get this plan communicated in a way that people can understand it, it allows us to be proactive and be ready for the scan when it should come. So with the amount of data that comes with laser scanning, consistency is key. Searchability is key. If you can't pull up a scan in minutes, and if it takes you hours to find that scan if someone asks for it, then you might as well not have it. The decisions in construction are made in real time and without having a complete picture. So if we can help close that gap a little bit by providing this information as quickly as possible, as accurately as possible, we can help paint a more complete picture so that the decisions being made are using the latest and greatest information. Because let's face it, if they don't have the information at the time they need to make the decision, they will still make the decision and we'll just have to deal with the consequences later. Indecision in construction can be more costly than an incorrect decision. So laser scanning, let's help close the gap. So reviewing scans. So after we go out and we scan the asset, how do we review it? There are scans today, even with the advent of AI, it still makes sense to just review them manually. A lot of our exterior scans, they are hyper-focused on what the asset is. It's not a bunch of different systems. It's usually one system that is about to be crossed by a future system, or it will tie in later to a future system. And so it's very specific. In this case, we don't use AI. We just take the point cloud into Navisworks and we do a quick review. document it, and move on. So not all scans today need AI. But the real challenge, as I mentioned before, with laser scanning is how do we balance capturing as much data as possible while still being able to review it without overwhelming the reviewer. I think this problem statement is where Avvir is really poised to help us solve that challenge.
So thanks, Tim. So hi, I'm Rafi, and I'm the CEO of a company called Avvir. We use reality capture data like laser scanning or photography, and we compare that reality capture data to your building information model to both quantify construction progress and evaluate construction quality. Now, Tim mentioned a roadmap, right? If you want to get where you're going, best to have a roadmap of what that plan looks like. And that's what the BIM is supposed to function as. But I haven't actually used a static map in over a decade, right? I pull out my phone and my map has GPS, right? The roadmap today has GPS so that you can close the loop and not just have the static information about what's in front of you, but also know where you are relative to that space. BIM was always meant to be that kind of roadmap. I actually came into construction through computer vision and working on computer vision and BIM. And I got acquainted with the history of BIM. And its inventors meant for it to be a digital twin of a building that would serve the building not just during the design phase, but during the construction and even the asset management phase of a building's life cycle as well. Historically, BIM never got there because, like any plan for a fast-changing reality, it became out of date very quickly, and BIM was difficult to keep up to date. You know, in the last 5 or so years, reality capture, particularly laser scanning, has made it possible to more directly compare your reality to your initial plan. But like Tim was just saying, if you engage in that, you'll still find it pretty overwhelming very quickly. You know, the amount of data and the number of decisions you need to make as to, you know, what's correct, what is, what's truly as built versus the design, where are things clashing, where are they not, and what matters. And so that was the primary problem that Avvir wanted to step in and solve. How can we take this, you know, waterfall of data that's coming at a VDC team or a project management team and take that workflow off of their plate? So Avvir ingests the reality capture data, it ingests the BIM, and then automatically does that comparison and analysis so that we can then turn over, hopefully an updated BIM, or at least a BIM that's highlighted with all of the issues, back to the BDC team and make their lives a whole lot easier.
Yeah, I think the real benefit to Avvir is how do we reduce the noise? There's stimulus all around us. And, you know, many times we make these mental shortcuts to help us deal with that. Avvir helps us to focus on the problem and allows us to spend time solving the problem instead of spending all of our valuable resources just simply finding the problem. Brings it to light, lets us focus on solving, not finding, reduces the noise. So bringing this back to how we're leveraging Avvir today in our workflow, I think we've been working with Rafi and team for probably close to a year now in conversations, and probably the last 6 months or so in production. And so we've seen a lot of improvement from when we just had this idea of, you know, how do we limit the amount of time we're spending to do these scans or to do these reviews, but still gaining all the value. Luckily, I don't know if the stars aligned or what happened, but Rafi reached out to me on LinkedIn, and that's how we got connected. And I'm really grateful that he did reach out, because it's been a blessing in that now we can spend time capturing, hopefully not in the future, but right now we're spending our time to capture. We then leverage Avvir to do the review for us. We then step back and then look at the findings. So interior scans, where the congestion is much greater and there are multiple trades in close proximity, that's where the opportunity to leverage Avvir or leverage AI is much greater. The ability to compare the scan by having the deviations glowing in red as I'm showing on my screen. Like I said, this allows us to spend time figuring out how bad is this problem, not where is the problem. So like I said, it allows us to spend our resources on solving, not finding the problem. One key benefit here is the ability to move a slider back and forth to kind of see where are these bigger problems. Move the slider and have the deviations glowing in red change based on how bad they're deviated. So for us on the job that I'm kind of showcasing here, we've got two levels of deviations. We have warning, which is a 1 inch that you're viewing right now, and then also critical, that's 3 inches. Meaning if it's if it's less than 1 inch out, then there's really not anything that we need to discuss. It's more of just take note of it. If there's anything getting close to 1 inch, then maybe take note of it, but we don't need to do anything about it necessarily. When we're between 1 and 3 inches, it needs to be a discussion. We need to start talking through it because we're getting closer to that critical level. The critical level is where we have to get the client involved. If there is a deviation that's greater than 3 inches, the client needs to weigh in to make sure that we're not just making a decision in a silo that may impact future builds that they may have in mind for retrofits. So we do have the ability in this platform to choose between 1 and 3 inches, or even 6, or down to 1/8. So it allows us to kind of tailor that message to the audience that it's going to. And this is where building control is paramount. Because if we can't get our scans to align to the model within a 1/2 inch or even a 1/4 inch, which is survey grade, how can we feasibly say or truthfully say what is wrong? Is it the scan or is it the system? So if we can't guarantee that our scans are accurate to the actual position in the field, we start to lose the ability to say, is the system that was captured in the scan right or wrong? Honestly, the client on this project is pushing us to guarantee accuracy of our scans down to 1/8 of an inch or even a 1/16 if we can get there. In my opinion, that's not possible today. We work really hard with our control network. There's close to 600 control points in this building. It's a 500,000 square feet in total. So there's a lot of control in there, and we do our best to get our resection, the quality of our control network as tight as possible to the 1/16. But right now there's no way to verify that, or to guarantee and have someone be able to verify that our scan is as accurate to real world coordinates as we're claiming it to be. So there is a push for it, as many jobs are. The client's asking for us to kind of push things a little further to see if we can get a little tighter. But we just got to be careful about where we push back and for what reason. So bringing this back to the model, Avvir gives us the ability to export a deviations IFC. We can export the as-built IFC, but more focused is we can export the deviated elements into an IFC model. This allows us to bring it back into Navisworks or into your model viewing platform of choice. Us, it's Navisworks. And the real benefit to that is we can look at downstream impacts. We can say, well, if this piece deviated and the rest deviated, equally, does that cause any downstream impacts? Are there any concerns about proximity or other things that may not be shown in the model? And that's where the human brain, I think, really comes in. Today, computers are getting there. Maybe not on construction, though. Can they answer questions like that? So the ability to export that IFC and bring it back to the coordination platform allows us to not add one more platform, one more source of digital or technology fatigue, but instead bring it right back. One future thing that we're trying to look into is the ability to do under slab scans. Right now, as you can see in the picture, we've got a bowl of spaghetti, as I describe it, of conduit going everywhere inside this building. And right now we're trying to figure out, well, can we leverage AI to review this? Stub ups, absolutely. Horizontal runs, possibly. Because we have to keep in mind that field bent conduit isn't going to be as perfect as modeled conduit. So we're still trying to dig into more of these types of scans to see where can we push the boundaries on what is possible today. At the end of this, finding these issues is only part of the problem. We also need to track them. If we're not tracking these issues to resolution, why are we even finding them? The follow through is what really makes the difference. On this job, we use BIM Track because of its integration into Navisworks, so we can screenshot it. We can have a conversation about it. We can assign it to the party that needs to address it. If it is a field issue that needs to be corrected in the field, then they will add it to BIM 360 field because that's their platform of choice. And so the real goal here is to get the information in the platform that the audience is using. And then lastly, keeping score. So we have a saying that if you're not keeping score, then it's just practice. And we don't want to practice. We want to keep score. We want to get better. And so like I mentioned, if we can smell the smoke before there's fire, we can react to it. We can put out the fire before it's ablaze. And so as many people on the call are probably using Power BI, we use it for deviation detection or deviation analysis to say, are there hot spots in the building that are glowing red? If there are, like the interior ones shown in red, do we need to get back, work with the design team to say, well, why is it a higher congested area? Can we use this data of where we're finding deviations? Maybe there are constructability issues. Maybe there are sequence issues. Can we bring that information to make the design better? And the only way to do that is to track and to keep score and make sure that we're all working in the same direction. I don't know who said it, but there's a saying out there that those who don't study history are bound to repeat it. There's nothing worse than repeating your mistake over and over and asking the client to pay for it over and over. So you may be asking, how long does it take us to go from scan to deviation report? Well, we've committed to our trade partners that we would do this within 24 hours. We can't ask them to slow down their production schedules to allow us to do this unnecessarily. So we've come to the agreement that if we can do it within 24 hours, we're slowing them down for a good cause, but if we go beyond that, we're unnecessarily slowing them down. The contractors do have the ability to say, we feel that we are correct, so we're going to proceed at risk and bury the system. We do say, though, if it's being buried by concrete, you must wait for us to let you know whether or not we saw any concerning deviations. The goal in all of this, and the real push behind the 24-hour turnaround, it goes back to that statement I made earlier about how do we decrease the number of decisions made where the person that is making the decision feels like they don't have a complete picture of the situation. This is just one more lens that we're looking at those problems from to try to have a better outcome. So now, what's next for lasers or for reality capture? That we can capture more, review more. There's probably more use cases out there. We can do it faster with things like platforms like Avvir or like Spot or Sky Duo. Maybe we fly a drone inside to capture nightly on like kind of high base spaces where a laser scanner would either have to be elevated or we lose fidelity. And we want to do this for less. If we can track progress installation and not only say the mechanical system is installed 60%, but we can say, hey, of that 60%, 10% there are deviations at the warning level, 5% there are deviations at the critical level. So then it gives us a better idea as to what is actually billable, and we don't start to spend money faster than we should, or our burn is actually what it needs to be to sustain a healthy progress through the job, and we don't just work through all of our budget right at the beginning, and we think that we're done, and we're actually not. So with things like Avvir or Sky Duo or Spot, I think we're all moving in the right direction. It's just now how do we tactfully do this to where we don't make false promises and we actually use the data to everyone's benefit.